Hey, everybody. We made it. So we are just days away from your final exam. You made it through Math 208. What I wanted to do with this video is to give you some information, just what you can expect on the final exam. As I mentioned before, the large majority of it is multiple choice, probably about 30 to 32 questions are multiple choice, followed up by 8 short answer. However, having said that, even though it sounds like there's a whole lot more multiple choice than short answer, point wise, because the short answer are going to allow me to do partial credit, point wise, they are about equal. So you really do want to kind of focus in on both. What I want to do with this video, like I said, is to give you some idea of what to expect. And also keep in mind, I'm not going to do a whole lot of examples. There is a review sheet with answers. It's a pretty extensive review sheet posted on Blackboard that you're going to want to really make sure you take a look at. But this will give you kind of an overview in terms of what you can expect, what formulas I'm going to give you, and so on. So first of all, a lot of this part here is going to be in the multiple choice. So know your terms. So know the difference between a population and a sample. Well, we've talked about that quite a bit. But here's a term that you haven't talked about for a while: correlation. Correlation is something we talked about way back in chapter 1. So correlation talks about how close to linear something is. So if you see a graph that looks like this, what I would probably consider that, first off, it's positive because it's going in an upward direction, but I would probably consider that one to be a strong positive, as opposed to maybe something like that. Okay, you see a little bit more of a downward look here, and I would probably go here weak negative. Now, keep in mind, there is also a choice for no correlation. And I got to be honest, my weak negative is starting to look like no correlation. But no correlation really would be just very, very random. There's no, you know, real pattern to it. Or oddly, no correlation, let me go over here, could be even something that looks like this. While there's certainly a pattern to it, it's not a linear pattern. So that would be a no correlation. Okay, as well as your just random smattering of points. Okay. All right, still back from chapter 1, measures of central tendency, mean, mode, and median. Be able to find all of those. Mean is your average, add them up and divide. Mode, I always think of MO for what is there the most. And median is your middle. Key here with median, put your numbers in order first. Okay. Standard deviation. You don't have to calculate standard deviation. When we did this back in chapter 3 or whatever it was, we did a whole lot of tables. That is not on there, but know what it means. Okay. Standard deviation references the spread of the data. Okay. Be very familiar with what that means. All right. Box plots. Again, something we haven't talked about for a long time. Box plots. We didn't draw any, but we did talk about the 5-number summary. And the 5-number summary is the minimum, Q1, Q2, Q3, and the maximum. So it's taking a bunch of numbers, putting them in order. So minimum, smallest, maximum, largest. Q1 is the 25th percentile. Well, that looks terrible. Q2 is your median. All right, so basically what Q2 does is it splits your data in half. Q1 then splits the first half of the data in half. And Q3 then is your 75th percentile, splitting the last half of the data in half. Okay. All right. So then coming over here, know the symbols. I had mentioned the other day that there's a matching section. All right. So remember, samples are English letters. Population is Greek letters. So your sample mean is X bar, where your population mean is mu. Sample standard deviation was S. Population standard deviation is sigma. Sample proportion was your P hat, whereas population proportion was P. Your Z-score is just Z. And your critical value, now we've gotten a little bit lazy lately, or I have, I guess, and haven't really been using this symbol a lot, but your critical value always either has the little alpha by it or alpha over 2. Basically showing that you're looking for that 5% or your 2.5% or whatever. Okay. All right. So next step. Whoops, let me get rid of all of those drawings. All right. So you need to be able to read graphs. You don't have to be able to draw any. Just be able to read a dot plot, be able to read a histogram. Remember, there's a difference between frequency and relative frequency. Your histogram is kind of your box plot where your lines are adjacent, all right? But you could have frequency over here, which is really just raw numbers. All right, really just talking about, okay, there were 4 at this level. The relative frequency histogram could look exactly the same, but if it's relative frequency, that's going to be percents over here. So maybe, I don't know, let's just go 0.1, 0.2, 3, and 4, in which case this would be 40% of the data. Okay, so please make sure that you understand the difference there. Shapes, left and right skewed, remember it goes by the tail. So a right skew is going to look like that, whereas a left skew is going to look like this. And then we know our bell-shaped or our normal distribution. Hopefully you're not leaving this class without knowing what that looks like, which is that. Okay. Again, most of these are going to be from the, or in the multiple choice section. Okay, then there's your dreaded probability. Okay, now probability, I'm going to be giving you your formulas. However, we talked before, don't rely on it. Probability, remember, is just the number of occurrences over the total number of occurrences. All right, know the difference between dependent and independent. The independent is I've got a bowl of marbles, I pick one and I put it back. Whereas dependent is I pick one and I don't put it back. So dependent affects the total amount. All right, sample space. If I flip a coin, maybe I flip 2 coins. My sample space is I could have heads and heads, tails, tails, heads, tail, tail, heads. Okay, compound probability, that's your and your or. All right, they have formulas with it. And you're going to multiply the probabilities, or is where you add the probabilities, but you don't want to count in that extra, or don't double count something. You'll see some of that in your review sheet. Conditional probability is that probability of A given B. All right, and that again has a formula attached to it that I will give you. Okay, the probability of both things occurring divided by the probability of B occurring. And redundancy is the thing where maybe the probability of getting an A on the final exam is 82%. And I want to know what's the probability that 3 people get A's. Well, that's that 0.82 to the third. Okay, so don't stress out a whole lot about the probability section. I know that that was something that was really difficult for a lot of you. It's a very small section on the exam. Okay, now the stuff that's a whole lot more familiar to you, hopefully, as you get down into the bottom here. But one of the things I did want to bring up that goes along with mean is the whole idea of weighted averages. All right, as an example here, let's suppose your grades consist of 75% is your test score, 15% homework, 10% class participation. The student has an 80 on their test average, and 92 on their homework, and 100 class participation. Their grade then is going to be the 80 test average times 75% plus the 92 homework average times 15% plus the 100 class participation times the 10%. And let me grab my calculator here. So if I figure that out, that would give them an 83.8 as their overall grade. Okay. Again, there's an example on the review sheet. Make sure you know how to do that. All right. Qualitative and quantitative. Remember, quantitative kind of has that word quantity in there. Quantitative data is numeric. Qualitative is more of a description. Discrete and continuous. Discrete was whole numbers. It's kind of countable, whereas continuous was your fractions and decimals. Okay. All right, then. Again, we're starting to get hopefully more familiar. Binomial distribution, know how to determine that. Binomial, two outcomes. I think one of the examples I had on your last test was the idea of testing whether somebody had kidney disease. All right, it was binomial because they either had it or they didn't. Be able to find the mean standard deviation. All right, those are the two formulas. You'll be given those. And then know whether something is significantly high or low. We haven't talked about that for a little while. However, that's that range rule of thumb. All right. More than 2 standard deviations away. Okay. Most of you were pretty comfortable with that, I think, when we did that. Then, of course, there's z-scores. So I will be giving you a z-score table and a t-table. Be able to find a z-score given the mean and the standard deviation. Again, you do need to know this formula. It's really one of the only formulas that you need to know. Make sure that you can use your table if I give you the area. That's where you look in the body of the table and find the z-score. Okay, kind of going backwards. And then be able to find the probability of less than, greater than, between, and interpret. Remember, the interpretation here has to include that word randomly selected. Okay, the probability that a randomly selected student from Math 208 gets an A on the final exam is 85%. Okay, something like that. All right, then we move on to the probability of finding a mean, okay, or at least using the central limit theorem. That's a thing where we have to adjust the standard deviation. I will give you this formula, be able to find a t-score with the degrees of freedom. I guess maybe z is not the only formula you need. You do need to know that the degrees of freedom is n minus 1. Okay. All right, we're getting close. So then we're going to get into confidence intervals. Did I skip something? No. All right, so confidence intervals, be able to interpret and find. You will be given the formulas. Again, the formulas are actually kind of the same as our test statistics. So find your area, write your interval. So remember, your interval is going to either be something like this or something like this. And the interpret key phrase there, based on this sample, I am 95% confident that the true mean lies between here and here, or whatever. Okay, and then as I mentioned a few times in the last few weeks, from chapter 8, you need to be able to find HO and HA. You need to be able to tell me the type of test, which is going to be your left, right, or two-tailed. Remember, that is based off of HA. You need to be able to find the test statistic, which is just using these formulas. And simply know, you do not have to make a conclusion, but simply know that the only 2 conclusions that you can make are to reject HO or fail to reject HO. Okay, as I mentioned before, most people typically do pretty well on the final exam, again, just because the questions are a lot more general, I think, than most of what we've been working with previously. So if you have any questions, please feel free to email me. I'm going to be keeping an eye on my email throughout the week leading up to our final exam. And then otherwise, I will see you at the final. All right. Okay, great. Good luck on the rest of your exams, and I will see you then. Bye.